Hello and welcome. You're watching Northeast today's live session with me, Deboshri Adhikari. We have a very special guest for our tonight's evening live session. He is Dr. Dominic Mao, Assistant Director and Lecturer, MCB and CPB program at the one and only, one of the best universities of the world, Harvard University. So, without any further ado, folks, let's welcome our guest of the evening, Dr. Dominic Mao. Hello, sir. Welcome to Northeast today's live session. We are so pleased to have you here. Thank you so much for taking our time out for our today's session.
Happy to be here.
Okay. So, sir, before we begin with our question and answer round, we would like our technical team has actually worked on this short video that we would like to show you on here. So, would you like to see that first, and then we can proceed with the question and answers?
Oh, I'd be delighted to see it.
Okay, so sure. Let's head on with the video first, and then so that our viewers get a glimpse of yourself, and then we'll head on with the question and answers. Dr. Dominic Mao is a lecturer and assistant director of undergraduate studies in MCB and CPB in the prestigious Harvard University. Dr. Mao was born in Imphal and lived in Manipur for 16 years and completed his Bachelor and Master degrees in Biochemistry from St. Xavier's College, Gujarat University. Later, he moved to the US to pursue PhD in 2007 and he earned his PhD from the University of Cincinnati in microbial molecular genetics studying genome stability in archaea. At Harvard University, as a postdoc, he studied aging and radiation resistance. Dr. Mao founded an education outreach program called PSIL, Program for Scientifically Inspired Leadership at Harvard University, with the goal to create a platform for students from Harvard and India to exchange skills, ideas, and cultural awareness. Dr. Mao has received accolades for his work teaching and advising Harvard undergraduates, one being the 2021 Star Prize for Excellence in Concentration Advising. He was also voted as one of the favorite professors of the class of 2019 and 21 in an annual poll by the Harvard Yearbook Publications. In 2019, he was awarded the Doty Lossick Prize for exceptional service in the Department of Molecular and Cellular Biology at Harvard. What a wonderful journey, sir. That was so nice to watch.
The pictures brought back a lot of memories. It's very nice to see all my colleagues and from all parts of the world and my students. That was a job well done. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much, sir. That all credit goes to our video editing team. And so what we saw in the video, you were in Manipur for almost 16 years, and then you moved to Gujarat for further studies. So, which of the states would you say is more closer to your heart? Because one's in the northeast, one's in the northwest, and with very different culture and people. So, which of these places you often want to revisit?
So I would say both places have a special place in my heart. I mean, I stayed in Manipur. I was born there in Manipur, and I stayed there for 16 years. But I stayed in Ahmedabad for about 12 years. So while my formative years were in Manipur, and I left at the age of 16 and transitioned to Ahmedabad was difficult, as most people from the Northeast would know, that once you go out of the Northeast, suddenly you look different and suddenly you face all sorts of challenges, including racism. So it was a difficult start, but the place grew on me as I got to know more people, as I got to know more friends, and my network grew. And that was really the place that opened up a lot of opportunities for me. And so, yeah, that's where I played music. That's where I have a lot of friends. So I don't think I have one preference over another. So I do have this really nice problem of not knowing which place to really call home, because I have a home in Manipur, I have a home in Ahmedabad, and I have a home in Boston.
Oh, all right. That's so it's difficult for you to choose one. Of course, very understandable. And so like for our next question, we'd like to show you a picture. And could you? We found this picture from it's. I'm guessing it's from your college days or your
This
school
is
days. And
this is class 9. this is
oh,
this is
oh, yeah, this is
1994.
from the school days. Okay, so sir, could you help identify yourself in this class photo and give us a little background about it?
Well, I'll give you a little background, and while I'm doing that, you can try and see if you can identify me.
I'll first.
So this
Uh,
is class 9 in Don Bosco School, Chingmerong in Manipur.
hmm.
Um, I can see so many of my closest friends. My best friend standing right next to me. Our class teacher was um Brother John. Well, he was called Brother John back then because he had not yet been ordained. He's a Catholic priest. Now he is Father John, and I'm still in touch with him. And the people of Manipur will recognize many folks there, or they should. Right in front of me is Dr. Xavier. He's a practicing surgeon in Manipur. There's my best friend Ruben next to me. Um, yeah, this picture brings back a lot of memories. So,
So,
what's your guess, Debashri?
so I'm guessing you're since the bride students always sit in the front row. I'm guessing you're sitting in the front row. If I then I may be wrong. In the front row, like next, in the first row, the third student to the left.
Right.
And
Okay. That's a good calculated guess because
yeah,
you went by some sort of deduction.
yeah.
However, the photograph was arranged based on height, and back
Oh,
then I had not yet shot up, so I was among. I would have been maybe under average in terms of height for my cohort. So I'm actually in the. So the tallest kids are in the front row.
oh, all right.
As you can tell, that they are almost as tall, or they're tall as our class teacher, who's a fully grown person at the time, right?
Yeah.
I am in the third row, so the middle row,
Okay,
and
the middle row.
I'm somewhere right in the middle, just above the our class teacher.
Okay, yeah, I can see one. There's one boy smiling and one in the
That's
middle.
right. I'm the one grinning from ear to ear.
That's a beautiful picture. So I'm sure it would bring back a lot of memories from school days. Also, then and now it has been a long time since then. So, and there has been a lot of changes in your life. You have moved from India to the US. So, could you share how you start your day and what an ideal day for you is?
Well, I start with a cup of tea, regular Indian chai. That's how I start my day. And then I have morning chores or whatever. Right? But while I'm drinking my tea, I'm usually checking messages from India. Because of the time difference, I usually have messages piled up from the night before. I'm just catching up on the news and news both from the US and back home.
So you always stay updated with what's happening in India as well.
I try to, yes, I try to. I mean, it's almost, I cannot ignore it, right? It's
Hmm.
always in my inbox, it's always on my WhatsApp messages. So, what affects people back home inevitably affects me because my friends report all those news to me.
Okay. And also, sir, in some of your past interviews, you had mentioned that you had taken a break from studies and taken up, you were in a music band. So, how was the experience and the transition from working as a musician to a PhD scholar?
Um, I mean, there were some aspects that were difficult, and there were other aspects that, um, having been a musician before going to graduate school, helped in many aspects. So the parts that were difficult, because I was in a band and we were playing gigs and, so that I didn't have too much of a structure in my life at that time. So when I went to grad school, my capacity and stamina to work under a structured environment was limited. But on the other hand, because I had taken this 3-year gap, and it was not voluntary in some ways, it was just I needed to earn the money, and music happened to pay much better at the time. So 3 years down the line, when I finally get a chance to go to grad school, although I'm a bit rusty, it was, I was ready to hit the ground running, and there was a stark difference between, people in my program who had taken a few gap years and are returning to school compared to the students who went straight into their PhD in just how eager we were to be in the program, while some of our peers were comparing themselves to people who have actual jobs, and they're like, some people have actual jobs and we're here earning a stipend or whatever. But for me, this was all bonus material because I was just very happy to be there, and I was happy to be learning and somebody paying me for it, So it was a good deal for me.
It's hard to imagine, like you are this brilliant person as we all picture. You're a lecturer, and also you have done your postdoc degree from Harvard, if I'm not wrong. So, someone
Right.
like
So
you.
the postdoctoral part is, it's not a degree program. It is more like screening. It's a transition period. So that's the pathway to independence, really. So after you earn your PhD, typically you go for a postdoctoral stint where you work about 3 to whatever years, trying to further develop your questions and trying to get independent.
And so you did your bachelor's and master's in biochemistry from St. Xavier's, Gujarat University. So how did you initially get inclined and inclined towards molecular and cellular biology? How did you get interested in the program?
It was a very natural transition. So I was always, ever since I was a kid, there was this expectation that I'm going to become a doctor, a physician. My father was a doctor, and many of my cousins are doctors. And so that was the trajectory that was predefined for me. And it didn't resonate with me too much. So, I was curious about how things work. And I really didn't like to memorize. And, if you're curious about how life works, you are required to look at things from the cellular and molecular level. And so, memorization, on the other hand, didn't work for me. So I needed things to make sense for them to stick in my mind, and biochemistry made sense.
All right. And, when exactly did you realize that this was your call, this is what you wanted to do for the rest of your life?
I don't think there ever was a moment where it clicked. It was just this natural transition, and I don't think I had a plan going in. And this is what I tell students also. There's always this sort of illusion that people knew exactly where they wanted to be. Maybe some people do, but I didn't. I was happy to be learning, and I was learning. I mean, there were moments where people around you ask, "What are you going to do with your life?" And because in India there is still this thing that you got to be a doctor and an engineer or a civil servant or something along those lines, and if you're not going down that path, then what are you really doing, right? So
Exactly.
I got that too, and there were times when it was like, oh, things look a little bleak or whatever, but so I didn't have a plan. Things evolved over time. I knew that I couldn't do medicine. I really hated memorization. I still do. And I like to figure things out. I like to know how things work. And so the subject was kind of predefined for me. And I discovered that I liked to teach. And so it was just a process, a very slow process over many years. I taught high school briefly in India as well. I taught guitar, so, but it was just, there was this common denominator that it's really enjoyable for me to be able to transfer knowledge and skills, and then to see it actually being transferred to somebody else. There was this immediate gratification from that really connected with me. Yeah, so there wasn't one day where I woke up, or I'm going for a jog and I'm like, aha, this is what I'm going to do.
Right.
That was not it. Yeah.
And so you did your bachelor's and master's in India and PhD abroad. Now that you're teaching in Harvard, and you're learning to see the difference between, how students are taught in India and the United States. So which one would you say it's more rigorous? Because in United States, we see, like, not just United States, abroad we see, students competing to get into Ivy League colleges. But in India as well, students are competing for, getting into civil services, cracking UPSC, AIMS, engineering colleges. So which one would you say is more stressful?
Well, in my experience, the Indian system was way more stressful. Right? There were way more things that I was required to know when I was a student in India. So perhaps one can say it's more rigorous in that sense, right? Depends on how you define rigorous. But there was very little opportunity to be curious or to explore. So on the other hand, here I was encouraged to be curious, and the emphasis was on critical thinking, creativity, things like that, which I really enjoyed. So the sage on a stage model back home, where the teacher shows up and delivers a lecture and students take notes, that didn't work for me. Don't get me wrong, I did have some good teachers in India that encouraged students to think, but that was the exception and not the norm.
Exactly. And a lot of students here are, practice to mug up and just go write it up all in the exams, and they forget it like in what, say, next 3 to 4 months, and it doesn't
Right.
always work, which is why they find it really difficult if a few of the, students, when they move abroad to study in universities like Harvard or Stanford, they find it really difficult to cope up with the
I don't know.
culture.
I mean, maybe some parts of it, yes, you do have to do a little bit of catching up. But like I said, there are certain things that are quite rigorous back home that serve you well when you come here, right? So there's a lot of focus on content back home, not so much on skills. And so, and you need both in order to excel. So if you bring a student from India here, usually they need to brush up on all these other skills, but the content is already pretty strong, right? So I do think that a balance is required, and I think that balance is skewed back home. And again, there are institutions that are very progressive and they're already up to par, but like I said, that's the exception, right? How many IITs are there? How many IIMs are there? Versus how many students are there, right?
Right. And do you think that needs to change? Like, there needs to be a reform too in the education system for students to be more competitive when they go out there, competing with thousands of other students who are also really hardworking and have seen it all in other countries as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't look at it from the point of view of students. The end point necessarily being students from India coming to the US or the UK or wherever. I think there essentially needs to be improvements in the system, and there have been, not as rapid of a pace as we would like. There have been improvements, but the improvements should not be guided by the fact that we want to send our students abroad, right? We should be able to provide quality education that prepares the student for the workforce, right? So my agenda is not to, prepare students to make them eligible candidates for Harvard necessarily, right? because Harvard is not the be all and end all, right? And it certainly is not the path for everybody. So, I think there just needs to be more widespread, overhaul of the system.
That's a great insight, sir. So also for our next question, we'd like to show you a picture. So could you give us the highlight and the story behind this picture, where it was taken, and what was happening at the moment?
Yeah, this picture brings back really fond memories, and this reminds me of the amount of fun I had during my PhD. I worked with Dennis Grogan at the University of Cincinnati, studying an organism that grows at 80 degrees Celsius.
Okay.
Dennis Grogan was such a great mentor, and we had an amazing lab group. So this is from a time when we took a road trip to Yellowstone National Park to collect samples,
Oh wow.
because the organism we were studying grows there. You can see in the picture steam rising from the hot springs,
Yes.
kind of like garam pani in Assam.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we spent a week in the park trekking each morning to go to sites where there was geothermal activity. And here I am attaching a temperature probe to a paint roller pole to check the temperature. And yeah, it's super high tech, but fun times.
How was the experience there? It was nice, like going there. It's such a beautiful place. Seems so nice.
It was amazing. It was amazing. We had access as researchers to areas of the park that tourists don't have access to. The park
Oh
itself
wow.
is incredible, right? It's
That's so amazing.
the size of a state, and it is the caldera of a volcano. So the entire park is the caldera of a volcano, and that itself is kind of mind blowing.
Yeah,
And
of course.
within there, you can find lakes and wildlife, and we had the luxury of being able to stay inside the park. There was this little research cabin where you could stay, and at the end of the day, many different research groups will come back from their individual study sites, and we will all cook our food separately, in different groups. There were many different stove tops for different groups, and I remember the time that we were there was a group of geologists that I think they were from Ohio State. Yeah, they were just monitoring geothermal activity in the area. And it was an awesome time.
Also, do you like share your opinions or views or the findings that you discovered there?
How do you mean?
No, you went there for the geothermal findings that you mentioned just
Right.
now,
Right.
and
So the thing is, I was studying how these organisms repair their DNA if they're going to be living at such high temperatures that naturally are DNA damaging. The question remains, how do they repair their DNA, or how do they maintain accurate genomes? And so in some sense, it was not necessary for us to do the field trip, but the field trip was, in my opinion, very essential. Although I was a lab bench scientist, as you would call it, and field work was not part of my thesis, but because we went to the trip, it really gave me, first we collected samples, and that samples ultimately resulted in a project that did get published. But the goal really was to only collect samples, right? So it was not it didn't directly contribute to my immediate PhD dissertation. Yeah, but if you're asking about what sorts of discoveries from my dissertation, there were a few. One of it was the one that was closest to my heart was I showed the first experimental evidence for some kind of mismatch repair in archaea that grows at high temperatures.
okay. And so like earlier we were talking about how the education system is different in India as compared to the US. So, like, is the teaching methodology you adopt in Harvard University right now? Would you say it's can be seen in India as well?
I do know there are many institutions in India that adopt many similar teaching methodologies that are being practiced here, and there might have been institutions back in the day when I was a student. Um, However, as I said earlier, that would be the exception and not the norm. You know?
Yeah.
When I was in Ahmedabad and I was a student in St. Xavier's College, um, we would go to IMA for their annual music festivals or whatever, and then we talked to the students there, and of course they were doing case studies and they had like active learning classrooms, but that's IAM, right?
Yeah.
So most of the colleges, I think, still do not have those active learning practices.
And so you also did an interview about teaching the topic of CRISPR. So in your course. So what makes a topic, warrant an interview?
Yeah, CRISPR-Cas9. This is one of many interesting topics in the course that I teach, but this one often gets special attention because of the buzz surrounding the topic. I do like the topic as it allows for discussions on many fronts.
Yeah.
Without going into too much detail, CRISPR-Cas9 is a prokaryotic defense mechanism, kind of like our immune system. So to your viewers who are not in the sciences, don't be alarmed by the word prokaryotic. It's just a group of organisms that are single-celled and very tiny, they're microscopic. So if a foreign DNA enters their cell, the CRISPR-Cas system can capture a part of the invading DNA and save the sequence information within its own DNA. And what this allows for is a surveillance system that actively looks for the same invading DNA sequence in the future. And if it encounters that sequence again, the CRISPR-Cas system can basically chop it up. So the system itself is super cool, but the reason why it has gotten so much attention, in my opinion, is because of the way it has been repurposed to edit genes. And that's made very specific cuts, and using clever engineering make specific changes to the genome. So naturally, it had a huge impact in both research and medicine. I should mention, though, that gene editing itself is not a new thing, but CRISPR-Cas9 made it relatively much easier to do so. The Nobel Prize in Chemistry last year was given to Jennifer Doudna and Emmanuel Charpentier for their work that made this possible. So that was the background about CRISPR-Cas9. And after that little detour, going back to the point for why this is a nice topic and how it generated an interview. The interview was conducted by a student of mine who was in the class at the time. And, it is a nice topic because we can talk about the power and importance of exploratory and basic research. We get to talk about the clever repurposing of a naturally occurring system. We can also go into discussions that are at the intersection of science and society, So now that we have a way to edit genomes with relative ease, we can correct sequences that cause disease, right? So that's why it's gotten a lot of buzz, but the student reached out to me to do this interview because obviously the topic really connected with him, and just the discussions covered a very wide range of areas.
Okay, so you can through this you can edit the genes, like that what you think, and you can also prevent diseases.
In theory, yes, and there are many. There are clinical trials that are ongoing that are essential. So the proof of concept is there, right? It's just about tweaking it to be close to perfect.
All right, and Nowadays, one of the most popular movies that we see, the science fiction movies, we see superhumans like Iron Man and X-Man, that they portray enhanced human beings with superhuman abilities. So with CRISPR-9, is that distant reality, or can we bring them to life? Is it possible?
There is no short correct answer, so here I'll give you the long one. So we have the technology to make changes to the genome, right? That's where we are. It's not perfect, but improvements are being made at a very steady pace, right? This can potentially cure diseases, like I just mentioned, but one can also attempt to design enhancements, like introduce immunity to diseases, for example, right? So yes, in theory, enhancements can be made, but in theory, right? I'd like to bold that. I've watched many of the movies that you mentioned, and those characters often have enhancements that defy fundamental laws of nature. And to that, the answer is no. You can't do that. I mean, Iron Man is a bit of a gray area, because the Iron Man with the suit, yes, the suit enables the guy to fly and all of that. So that is possible. I mean, the character does not have that kind of enhancements other than this thing that keeps him alive. I don't know what that is, but so yeah. But if you're talking about some of the other X-Men, like shooting bolts of fire out of your eyes, like I just don't know how that works out in terms of laws of physics.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, I would say no, and I'd be very happy actually if I could be proven wrong, if somebody pulled it off.
You're saying like somebody like Iron Man could come to life, but like Flash, as we have seen in DC movies, that's not possible.
Right, to move at that speed with the mass that you carry, I don't think so.
You're not humanly possible. And so what is your tell us about your plan. Do you have any plans to create an education infrastructure system other than any programs in India right now?
Right, so in 2018, I piloted an outreach program, and then with the help of a former student, Chris Lee, brought Harvard students in 2019 and 2020, and that was the PSIL program that you alluded to in your intro video. So it is a pet project that's very near and dear to me. I have no plans to create an education infrastructure system from the point of view that you mention it, because there already is one in place, right? India already has a huge education system. My goal is simply to enable easy sharing of resources, skills, and knowledge.
Okay. And so how do you assess the education system? Since you are from the Northeast, and you were born and brought up in Imphal, if I'm not wrong, and so growing up, you have seen how the education system is in the Northeast, and we lack a lot of basic necessities. So how do you assess the education system here in the Northeast? And according to you, what is most needed here in the Northeast region? What most needed reform in the Northeast right now?
Well, I'm not an expert on the subject. I've just been through the system, and I've not done any formal assessment of the northeastern states, either in isolation or compared to the rest of the country. So when I was a student in Manipur, there was this generalization that if somebody wants quality education, they need to go out of the Northeast.
Yes.
And I believe that generalization still exists. I'm not saying students who study in the Northeast cannot succeed. I have classmates who got all their education in the Northeast and have succeeded, but there seems to be significant obstacles to learning. Right? A big one is buns or school closures on account of general strikes. The frequency of buns was much higher when I was a student in Manipur than when I was in Ahmedabad. So, I think that the problem of frequent school closure still remains true, unfortunately, at least in Manipur. And that's certainly a roadblock that needs to be rectified.
Yeah, and it's not just limited to say Northeast. There are places all over Northeast, like in Assam, Mizoram, say Nagaland. There are a lot of disturbed areas, and plus because of the pandemic, the education system has been hampered. Students were devoid of classrooms and education, so already affected area. There are a lot of obstacles adding up to it, and that's not all, and we still have a long way to go.
That's right.
Yes, sir. We will just you could see a picture on the screen a while ago. So I'd like to request our technical team to show the picture back again. So could you tell us about this photo?
Yeah, that was from PSIL 2020. That was
Hmm.
January 2020, the last time I was in India. On
Hmm.
our return, the world shut down essentially.
Yeah.
But this is an activity that we were doing with students, and here students are assembling a microscope. This is it's called the Foldscope, and it's this genius idea um, that allows students to have their own individual microscopes. And it's very scalable because each microscope costs about $2 or something. And the most expensive piece is this lens, and the rest of it is made with paper essentially. So kind of like using the origami
Hmm.
technique, assembling
That's
a
beautiful.
microscope that you could use, and it has very
Yes.
good resolution. I mean, that's less than 5 micron resolution, so you could actually use it. And I know some field researchers um, using it. So it's not just an educational tool. People have been using it for research as well.
Hmm.
It's very durable, and they have adapters that um, you can fix the entire full scope to your phone, a cell phone, and you can capture an image of whatever you have mounted. So yeah, with innovations like these, we could just equip every single participant at very low cost with their own microscopes, right? And yeah, that picture is just amazing because um, it's always nice when you see students working with their hands, and that's when um, you're really equipping you know, you're allowing them to be curious, and once you have the microscope, you could put whatever on a slide and you could look at it, right? So it's this never-ending adventure.
All right. And so since you are a lecturer and of undergraduate studies in Harvard right now, you're teaching a branch of science. So what according to you is scientific teaching?
Scientific teaching is a very simple concept of applying the scientific method to teaching and learning. So asking questions like, is this teaching style effective? How can I effectively measure learning? Are my students actually learning? And things like that. So, and then you make data-driven decisions on course design, for example. So it's really just asking questions, looking at the evidence, tweaking and throwing out what does not work, and keeping what works, right? So, and that's what guides us in our course design.
And yeah, so you also initiated the program for scientifically inspired leadership in Manipur. Students of Harvard came to a far-flung region of India and interacted with students and schools and colleges of Manipur. So, what is the speciality of the program, and what was the outcome? And what are your plans of carrying it forward?
Right. So with the program, I essentially built a platform where three groups of students get together. And the idea is that they exchange skills, knowledge, and cultural awareness. So the three groups of students would be Harvard students, they are teachers in the program, college students in Manipur that are interested in teaching, those are the teacher fellows, and high school students of Manipur, and they are the participants. So the way that it works is each member of the Harvard team develops a module based on an area of interest, something that they are passionate about, something that resonated with them from their courses at Harvard, things like that. The teacher fellows calibrate what the Harvard students develop for local relevance. So, if the module is developed over here, some of the examples or some of the activities may not work for the local area. So then the teacher fellows are critical for calibrating. And then the two teaching teams, they co-teach the material to the participants. So, the teaching staff incorporates many active learning methodologies that are used in the Harvard classrooms. And the backbone of the curriculum is the scientific method. But one very important point I'd like to make is that we're not there to teach scientific content, because I think students get enough of that in their schools. I know I did. So what we are trying to do is that you don't, we're also not preaching that everybody should do science. Some people may like art, some people like music, whatever, do what you will. But we're just saying that you could use the scientific method, and we do every day in our lives, right? And if you just think about it hard enough, you can really use it to enhance your learning. To your question of outcome, I mean that you could unpackage outcome as output versus impact. So output would be things like over the 2 years, over 150 high school students participated, say about 6 college students from Manipur, 8 Harvard students. So that's the output, right? The impact, with education, impact is harder to measure, because sometimes the returns take a long time. But I do have anecdotes. So, for example, there is a nonprofit called Mitsna, which is a very interesting story in Manipur. There's this the first year that I did PSIL in Manipur in 2019, and then we're preparing to go back in 2020, and I received an email from a fellow called Meirava, and he said, "I'd like to interview you for my group, and we are also sort of an education platform." And he wrote, "Would you be available while you're in Manipur to do an interview?" And he said that he formed the group before PSIL, the Mitsna group, but it was dormant. And the 2019 PSIL, that I did some TV interviews when I was there in 2019, that jump-started him to revive Mitsna again, So that to me is a measurement of impact, right? And they've been doing great work, and that's one example of impact. We've also had our students, the participants, from the program, we tell them to pay it forward. So we have had those students go back to their schools and conduct some of the activities that they learned in our program and share it with their younger classes in their school. So that's also a measure of impact for me personally.
That's so wonderful, yeah.
Yeah, we've had our teaching team are now in teaching jobs, and they credit the having bagged that position, from having gone through our program.
That's so great. So, like, you have also set up an example for so many people who'd be willing to, go forward, step ahead, go out. People, especially from the Northeast, are not really, how do I put it? Not, they don't have anybody as such, whom we know. We see somebody from our land going out there, making it so big, and when people see this, people see you, they will be so encouraged to move forward. So, like, did you ever have people, from Manipur telling you, asking you, like, about the opportunities out there and how they can make?
I lost you there for the past about 5 seconds or so. So I don't know if there was a question there. I couldn't hear you for the.
No, sir. I was saying. So I was saying how since you are from Manipur and you have found such a long way. So people from your region, from Manipur, especially from Northeast, they would be looking forward to, what all you have done. And they must also be asking you, if I had known you personally, I'd be asking, how do students from India, students from Northeast, what steps do we initially take and everything. So
Right.
do you have people coming to you and asking for advice?
Yes, I mean, I do, and that's part of the reason why I set up this program, because I am one person, and I oversee at Harvard about 150 odd students, and so I have a responsibility to those students. So when you get email from that many students, that's pretty much half your working day, and then you have other administrative tasks. So I have limited bandwidth to answer other queries. And so I was like, what better way than to, share with the students from back home one of the most valuable resources from Harvard, which would be some of their best minds, students. And the Harvard students are the go-to people for the participants of the program. So now I've essentially, outsourced all of that information sharing to Harvard undergrads. And not just Harvard undergrads, but the Harvard undergrads work very closely with the teacher fellows. And so the teacher fellows are also now point people for sources of information, because they work very closely with the Harvard team.
And so earlier, like we were talking about PSIL, I wanted to know about it more. So could you tell us how PSIL entail, and please explain to our viewers, and are there any outreach programs, run by many NGOs or young startups from India creating holistic experimental class programs? So how is PSIL different from such an holistic experimental learning program?
Right. I know of some programs that exist that are doing really good work, and but I don't have a broad overview of all programs or all sorts of efforts. What I thought about when I was thinking about PSIL, and I thought about how am I uniquely poised to offer to the students of Manipur, that would be a window to Harvard, essentially. And so bringing Harvard students, I ran the program on my own in the summer of 2018. And there is still a big gap between me and the students, because they never get off the training that they have, which is, oh, you've got to respect your teacher, you've got to call the person sir. I mean, you've been doing this all along. So it's very hard to get out of that mentality. And, I thought it would be way more inspiring for the students of Manipur to get it from Harvard students, right? Because these are students that are just a few years older than them. So way more inspiring. So I would say, if there is one thing that is unique about the program, it would be that. The others, I don't have enough information to have an opinion on, really, as a comparison between our program and other programs that have been carried out. But Harvard students bringing the Harvard classroom with them, I think, is a unique point of the program. We have a lot of activity-based learning. Excuse me. And like I said, there may be other programs run by other nonprofits that do that as well. But some of the things that we base our curriculum on is that the person that does the work does the learning, and as a result of that, so lecturing is not effective, not as effective as brainstorming case studies, doing activities, grappling with problems together. These are certainly more effective than lecturing. So the full scope, you saw the picture of students assembling the full scope. We had a module on journalism. We had a module on implicit bias, and tons of problem solving, thinking outside the box, and so those are the things that the Harvard students bring with them when they are in PSIL. And those are many of the sort of skills that are also incorporated in courses, right, at Harvard. So yes, I would say a short answer would be Harvard students bringing the Harvard classroom with them. to Manipur is one of the best things about the program.
And so, since it's currently operational in Manipur, like, do you have any plans to run PSIL in other parts of Northeast or India as a whole?
Yes, the good news is that upon our return from Manipur, or maybe it was before. Anyway, I got connected with some diplomats. They are now good friends, and we essentially through them got an invitation to expand the program to Telangana. And so we, so there is an active sort of work in progress to expand the program. And, it is scalable, yes. When we solicited applications for the Harvard team, when I was assembling the Harvard team, because of the funding and the budget that we had to work with, we could only select 4 or 5 students each year, but we had about 50 applicants each year. So certainly the program is scalable, and there's other aspect of scaling too, because we have this paid forward model, sharing of info. So there is that aspect of scaling as well.
Now, so how do you measure the success of PSIL? Are you still in touch with the students that attended your program?
Right. So measuring success, I mean, we definitely do a student satisfaction survey at the end of the program. We also have anecdotes from parents. The program has only been running for 2 years before we had to pause because of the pandemic. If not, we would most likely have returned January 2021. But so some parents reported that, earlier my son was the quietest kid, but now he's just bombarding me with questions. And, it's like basically being more assertive, being more curious, And so we have a lot of those anecdotes from parents. The idea never was for me to be in touch with the students because, like I said, my bandwidth is limited. But we have a Facebook group, and the Harvard students and the teacher fellows, I think they definitely have WhatsApp groups with their own students. So the idea was for the conversation to carry on even after the program. Now, keep in mind that those connections they need to be nurtured. It's not, nobody is mandated to continue talking to each other. So I hope that the participants of the program have been fostering and, basically keeping those connections alive.
And so what role do you see the government is playing in scaling up your program? Can the civil society or the schools also become a part of this PSIL program?
Yeah, totally. I mean, so the first year that I did PSIL, I did it in my old school, Don Bosco. The second year that I did it, I wanted to do a residential program, and Don Bosco did not have that kind of infrastructure, so I needed dorms, And the big motivation for that was also because of funds, because we didn't want, we have 1 week with the students, and we didn't want a bunds to take away precious time, after we put in all this work. So we wanted it to be a residential program, so then we're immune to bunds, right? The learning can continue even if the state closes. So yes, definitely there needs to be local partners. The government can play a very important role. Even if we are not directly operating in the state, we are happy to share our curriculum with anybody. I mean, it's up there on our website. And we see this more so as a place where, we spore off these skills, right? So when I was in Ahmedabad, I studied Sanskrit briefly, and there was a shloka. I don't remember the shloka. I was terrible in Sanskrit, but I do remember the translation, and the translation was knowledge is a treasure that is unparalleled because it increases upon sharing and it diminishes upon hoarding. So
It diminishes upon?
upon hoarding. If you just
Okay.
collect it all to
Yeah.
yourself, then it is finished. So yes, definitely there are different kinds of scaling, and I would say yes to all of the above.
Yeah. And so, what kind of infrastructures are required to, run a program like the one you're running in Manipur with PSIL?
That's easy. Funding and reliable local partners, right? Um, there have been many lessons that we have learned, and that is part of the cultural exchange also, right? And one thing that we saw, that our team saw, that we found really challenging to work with was, for example, everybody showed up late, and it's just not acceptable. I would just say it's just not acceptable everywhere in the world, because nobody shows up late for an exam, even in Manipur, right? So it is selectively being late, and so when I say reliable local partners, it means whoever we're working with. We've had many situations where people said yes, and then they didn't deliver. So that we are not able to work with that kind of a setting. So yeah, all we need is funding and reliable local partners to run the program.
Okay, so we got to know a lot about PSL. I'm sure a lot of students will be coming forward. And so for our next question, I'd like to show you a picture. It's a really nice picture of students turning on their flashlights. Could you tell us about this? What was happening here?
Right. So this was when we did it in 2019. So this was the media room of my old school, and we were doing this talent show. Well, I think this was the last day or something, or the day before the last day. And in the middle of the performance, there was a power cut.
Oh, damn.
And, I kind of panicked, and I ran out of the room to try and find the custodial staff of the school to try and start the generator, and so I was essentially trying to hunt this person down. And on my, while I was running around the corridors, I heard all this claps and, people cheering, like the show is going on. And then I ran back to the room to see what's going on. And essentially the students found a good hack to make sure the show goes on. They just turned on the flashlight on their cell phones. And I think one of the Harvard team members took this photo. And this is one of the things that, I really love about the program, is that the learning is not one-sided. We at Harvard, because we have an abundance of resources, maybe these sorts of hacks don't come easy for us. And it's just an amazing demonstration of how creative the students of Manipur are, right? How creative they are, and maybe that's a product of the environment, but there are many lessons to be learned, essentially, for our students as well. And that's what our students report to. So I make the Harvard students submit a report at the end, and every single person, they say it's a life-changing experience for them, and they really enjoy the program. And one recurring theme in their reports is that how the students of Manipur, despite not having that many resources and opportunities in comparison to students at Harvard, how they never complain, and how they're always so happy and content. But again, this is a really fun thing.
And so, what kind of bottleneck do you see in the education system of Northeast, of Manipur, or any other Indian states as compared to the education system of the US? You have earlier mentioned, but could you give us more brief on this?
I would say it's the distance between the students and the teachers. In the classroom, contradicting or questioning teachers is frowned upon, even punished back home. And it's like if you ask a question, some people can say, "Oh, why are you being over smart?" I bet many people have heard that. Here it is celebrated and encouraged. When a student asks questions, it's a sign of learning, right? Or engaging with the material. And so that is a big bottleneck. Like I said, the sage on a stage model, I think it actually hampers learning. There's this huge distance. It's not like I encourage many of my students here to call me by my first name. And we try to break that barrier of teacher and student, and I see myself more as a facilitator of a discussion rather than a teacher that is transferring knowledge into students' minds. And, so one of the first things is this sort of titles being discarded. I encourage that. And back home, if you don't call somebody sir, it's almost a sign of disrespect, and I don't understand that. Because respect can be shown in many different ways. If I work with you and you call me sir and you don't deliver on tasks or you're late, you're calling me sir, but you're still disrespecting me by not delivering, right? On the other hand, you can call me by my first name and you could have great work ethics, and that would be a sign of respect, right? So it's not that students calling their teacher by their first name is a sign of disrespect. I think it just reduces some of these barriers, right? We are training the students to be critical thinkers, and they cannot be critical thinkers if they're scared of you, if they're scared to question you.
Yeah, and that's some great insight. And India still lacks this modernization, or there are some changes that needs to be made, and we can still learn from what's happening abroad. And about students, what would you give advice would you give to students who want to go abroad for further studies, and how do they make themselves more competitive? Because as we know, students abroad, like for instance, in the US, they since their school days, they take up so internships and all these exams. So how do we compete with that?
So in general, I would say anybody that's interested in higher education, not necessarily abroad, but including studying abroad, in order to make themselves competitive, they have to read, they have to actively seek knowledge, right? And the reading has to be outside, not limited by the curriculum or the syllabus, right? So they have to be avid readers. The internet is your friend, right? Most students have a smartphone. That was the very good thing that I noticed, that it was widely available. One of the things that I noticed was that many of the students had phone plans that gave them 2 gigs of data a day. And I have 5 gigs a month. I was like, wow, that's pretty impressive. But then I also realized that the 2 gigs a day would be all the internet that they have for many people. Whereas for me, I'll have Wi-Fi at home and then I'll have Wi-Fi at work. So the data I'm only using in between, right? So yes, almost everybody has access to the internet. Use the internet to find out the information, right? Many of my staff members often will get questions and they just don't know where to start other than just sending the link, right? So because sometimes people will say, okay, what is required to apply to Harvard, right? Personally, I think that is not too good a use of the time of my staff members, because that is a question Google can answer. But if you just say admissions Harvard, you will get FAQs, you'll get a ton of information. So the information is out there. I encourage students to go find the information, right? Read up and try to compile all of them. And then when you hit a roadblock, then that's what the PSIL program staff will potentially help you with, right? So I think students do have a very powerful tool, which is the internet. And they need to be well-rounded scholars, and they need to actively seek out information. And even when they're asking questions, so the PSIL staff, for example, whether it's the Manipur team or whether it's the India team or the Harvard team, all the participants have access to these people. When they ask questions, it should be pointed questions, right? It shouldn't be questions that demonstrate you have not done the initial work.
And so, if somebody they do manage to get through, so what are the funding options available for students who want us, for instance, want to do their masters or their postdoctoral degrees or PhDs, like in United States or any other country or in Europe?
PhD programs in general are fully funded. Certainly true for the STEM fields. And the postdoc, like I said, is a professional training program, and it's not a certificate program. But you get paid, right? And you get paid the NIH standard pay scale. So graduate school is a free ride. Master's programs, typically you have to pay, right? In the life sciences, not all institutions will offer a master's program. So yeah, but funding is available for PhD programs.
And so we got to know a lot about you in this 1 hour span. So and you have found out so many wonderful things. So how do you go about finding information, and how do you go about exploring the unknown?
How do you go about exploring the unknown? Well, you have to read widely, right? Like I said, when I was in Ahmedabad, that was the first time that I realized that there are friends of mine that are thinking about a career in design, because Ahmedabad has a school of design, right? School of architecture and school of fashion technology, and this was back in '96, and I was like, I had never even heard of these programs. So it was but keeping an open mind and actively seeking it out. Of course, I had the luxury because I was placed in Ahmedabad, right, because of the migration. But now it's a level playing field with the internet. Right? A lot of people spend a lot of time on the internet, and what you consume is pretty much up to you. So I would say, many people. So, for example, if you are reading up on things and you realize that you don't understand a particular career path or a particular job title, you could make a profile on LinkedIn and find people who have that title and reach out to them and ask them pointed questions. You do have a higher likelihood of getting a response if your question shows that you've done all the background work and you're really genuinely stuck somewhere. So I'm making the distinction between tell me what I need to know, which is a sign that you've not really done your work, right? Versus I found this and I read up on these, but this particular thing does not make sense. Would you be willing to help me out, right? I think people will respond, right? You may send 10 messages and get one, but that one is all you need, right? So yeah, ask away, but also do the groundwork. I mean, I'm putting a lot of onus on the student, yes, because I want them to. Because in some places there isn't an option, right? It has to be a multi-pronged approach. And what I'm telling the students when I say all this is that you cannot wait for everything to be overhauled in order for you to do something, right? You'll have to move ahead with the assumption that I'm going to get where want to get, whether it's seeking information or pursuing something, even if nothing else is available, even if my teachers are not good resources for career options or whatever, you know. So, yeah, essentially what I'm telling the students is they, especially students in Northeast India, is that they really need to go above and beyond. You know, it's no secret that many places are under-resourced, but this is why, you know, especially why they have to really step out of, you know, definitely do what is required of them. They need to excel in exams and all of that, right? But they need to do that little extra.
All right. And so, lastly, what would be your message to teachers and students and parents and education reformers of the Northeast and of our country in general?
So yeah, to the students, you know, you need to define slash discover yourself. You cannot do that by just sticking to the curriculum most times. So, you know, for example, if today I were to ask, you know, any Northeast student, like, what can you tell me about yourself, right? So that the student needs to reflect upon, right? And the majority of students that I've spoken to and challenged with that question will tell me about what grade they're in, what school they're in, their age, and, you know, those kinds of information. And then if I probe further, saying, what do you like or what do you dislike, and what is the most meaningful thing that has happened in your life, and what is your opinion on this particular political current affair or whatever, then it gets a little bit shaky, right? Because the school system does not really encourage that style of reflection, right? You're so busy going from school to tuitions and back to exams, and, you know, that's the loop that you're in. So, you know, you need to define and discover yourself. You need to read aggressively, because that helps in the process of defining and discovering yourself. You know, to not confine yourself to the syllabus. You know, you stay curious. You have to work smart. You have to work hard. Use the power of the internet to seek out, explore opportunities. You know, the goal is to be a well-rounded scholar. It is true that other places have more resources and opportunities, but the students of Northeast need to ask themselves this, that if an opportunity of your lifetime was presented to you right now, have you done everything within your power to live a life where you can grab the opportunity right away and make the most of it? And that's a very important question for students to answer. You said students, teachers,
Parents.
so teachers, yeah. Switching to an active learning model is not easy, but it is mostly an initial investment, and subsequent years become much easier and more rewarding for everybody. Yes, you are working in a system where you have to prepare students for exams, but keep in mind that in the real world, they will need skills. Find creative ways to include things that develop critical reading, writing, presentation skills, you know, while working within the system. So I firmly believe that I am where I am because of a few good teachers and mentors who did exactly that. They taught me how to think. They taught me the value of learning how to think. And above all, they inspired. So that would be my message for teachers. And people who hold teaching positions and send proxy teachers to teach for them, I would say, please seek voluntary retirement. To parents, yes, performance in exams, super important, but so is holistic growth. You know, things like sports, music, dance, art. These are not distractions. I know parents work hard to give their children an education, but they have to keep in mind that if the kids get a good education, They will learn to think for themselves, and that's when the parents need to give them the space and the freedom to grow. And which group am I?
Education,
Sorry?
education reformers for education reformers of our country.
Policymakers, get rid of this disease of proxy teachers. Reward teachers that are experimenting with innovation in the classroom. Try to set up pathways for students, and there's an abundance of best practices within teaching, right? And it's freely available, and it's just a matter of putting it into practice. And it boils down to bureaucratic inertia. Just have to overcome that, and of course, to the general public, right? All of the above. I may be a little outside my area of expertise, but I just have this question for people to reflect on, which is, can we agree to make learning immune to general strikes? If there needs to be a bun, sure, go ahead. But can we still have schools open so that learning continues? Too often have I seen that, okay, there's some grievance within the education system. We're going to shut down the schools. That to me seems like you're shooting yourself in the foot, right? So I've had friends who are brilliant students, and they are, I have a friend who's a teaching faculty in Cotton University, and yeah, I visited him, and I visited his department too, back in 2018. But brilliant fellow, and went through all his training in the Northeast, but because of all the buns and the strikes, a 3-year graduate degree took him 4 years, right? And it's just unnecessary, right? I think if the general public agreed that, okay, we're just going to make sure that learning is not hampered. Yes, somebody may come back to me and say, you're not a political scientist, or you don't understand how this works. It may be true, but it's just a note for reflection.
I totally agree with what you said. So, the strikes and curfews shouldn't be affecting the education system. We are already struggling as it is, and we don't need additional barriers affecting more already affecting our education.
That's my dog. Really my kids are back, and Amy, go to bed.
So what time is it in the United States right now?
It is 11:18 a.m.
Oh, it is, and okay, it's 8:48 p.m. here right now. I won't keep you for longer. You must have other stuff to attend to. So, and thank you so much for today's session. So you have imparted so much knowledge and insight for all our viewers and for so many people watching. So thank you for your time, and thank you for attending our today's session. We'd love to have you again on the show, sir. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and I hope the information was helpful to your viewers.
Dr. Dominic Mao is a lecturer and assistant director of undergraduate studies in MCB and CPB in the prestigious Harvard University. Dr. Mao was born in Imphal and lived in Manipur for 16 years and completed his Bachelor and Master degrees in Biochemistry from St. Xavier's College, Gujarat University. Later, he moved to the US to pursue PhD in 2007, and he earned his PhD from the University of Cincinnati in microbial molecular genetics, studying genome stability in archaea. At Harvard University, as a postdoc, he studied aging and radiation resistance. Dr. Mao founded an education outreach program called PSIL, Program for Scientifically Inspired Leadership at Harvard University, with the goal to create a platform for students from Harvard and India to exchange skills, ideas, and cultural awareness. Dr. Mao has received accolades for his work teaching and advising Harvard undergraduates, one being the 2021 Star Prize for Excellence in Concentration Advising. He was also voted as one of the favorite professors of the class of 2019 and 21 in an annual poll by the Harvard Yearbook Publications. In 2019, he was awarded the Doty Lozic Prize for exceptional service in the Department of Molecular and Cellular Biology at Harvard.